Hi everyone, I'm Dennis. I work here for the Red Umbrella Fund, and I thought of making this small video to share some useful information to improve your application. As you know, we have a call for proposals open right now. The deadline is coming up. It's 28th July, so don't forget that. So please submit your application before the 28th of July. It's really important that you only apply if your group is sex worker led, if it recognizes sex work as work, follows the principles of the Red Umbrella Fund, and if your group is willing to build and strengthen the sex worker movement. So that's the eligibility criteria. You find all the details and information in the guidelines. So what I want to focus this video is really on the kind of useful information that's not in the guideline that you might find relevant to consider when you're writing your application form. So one of the things I always say is that if you have questions in relation to your application form, please reach out to us and we can provide personalized feedback. So we can review your application, give you comments, ask you to clarify bits and pieces of your application, and that might help you to increase your chances of being selected, for example. So but if you also have questions about certain questions that are not clear to you, you can also reach out to us and we can clarify that. It's really important that you realize when you're writing this application that the people reviewing them are sex workers. So they're sex workers from different parts of the world. We have at least 2 program advisory committee members in the different regions of the world. So they might not be entirely familiar with the kind of work your organization is doing or the context in which you're doing those activities. They might not know the partners that you work with. So I always advise people to clarify those things, because the more they understand about your application, of course, the higher chances of your application being selected. So clarity is very important, and always remember that things that are obvious to you might not be obvious for them. Application forms are in 4 languages, so in Spanish, Russian, English, and French. So these are the 4 languages that we work with, and they are translated into those languages. But you can also submit your application in Portuguese, because we have staff who speaks Portuguese, which is actually me. So it's really important that you submit in one of those 5 languages, and if you can't speak those languages, reach out to allies or organizations in your countries that can help you to make an application. And if you don't have that, then you can still submit a Google translation of your application. That's also fine, and it will be considered. Yeah, so I think it's really important to understand that the context, so sex workers in the committee, they need to understand the context behind your organization. When you put your references there, it's also important that you fill in the 2 fields. So there's a reference for a sex work organization and a reference for an allied organization. So make sure that you submit at least 1 sex worker reference, because that's very important for the eligibility. You can submit 2 sex worker references if you want, that's also fine. The references are validation that your organization is existing out there, that is doing awesome work. And so you do have to fill in those fields, and think of references that actually know your organization, that they know that you're doing important work, that they can tell about your work, and inform your references that they are part of this application, because we will contact them and they will be providing information about your group. Yeah. Also fill in the application form. I say that because many people forget to answer some of those questions, and it's very important that you fill in all the fields of the application form. So, and if a question is not relevant, then just write not relevant, but fill in all the fields in the application form and avoid contradictions. So there are different questions in the application form. You have to make sure that your message across is consistent, that you're not saying one thing in the beginning and then you're saying another thing in the end. Because that causes a lot of confusion, and it's important to have clarity in the kind of work you're doing for the external readers, I mean. A very important part is related to the organizational structures. So again, the people who are reading your applications, they are sex workers and they know how a sex work organization looks like. So they're not expecting you to submit information like NGO type. So they're not asking you to have all sorts of structures. They're not asking you anything in reality. So they just want to know how your organization is structured and how it's organized, like what kind of democratic processes you have. How do you make sure that sex workers can speak up in your organization? How do you involve sex workers in the different parts of your organization, in the different structures? But we're not asking for very complex things. We're just asking information about how you function. And that's really important to have some clarity on. Also in relation to the successes, so many organizations send in their successes, but they don't explain why that is relevant in their context. And again, choose those successes that actually stand out. So the things that you're very proud of, and explain the context behind that and why it's relevant in your context to actually do that. Because it might not be entirely clear for the other program advisory committee members. And the competition is really high, so you have to stand out, right? So make sure you choose the right examples. If your organization is a national, local, or regional network, make sure you explain why you are a local organization, why you are a national organization, and why your organization is actually working in a regional scope. So explain what kind of national work you're doing, for example. So if you claim to be a national organization, you have to explain why. Is it because you're doing national advocacy? Is it because you have members in the different parts of the country? Or you're doing outreach in different parts of the country? So make sure you explain why you are a national network, why you are a local organization, and if you're a regional network, make sure that you explain that too. So if you're based in 2 different countries, that might not be considered a regional network, for example. So that's really important. Make sure you explain a little bit about your membership, what your members are doing, and how you structure it. That's often something that people don't explain really well. And the last thing I want to share is that you do have to be very clear and honest about the challenges and the limitations of your organization. And I'm saying that because many times people tend to hide that information because they don't want to be a weak application. But that's also it's something that strengthens your organization, because the sex workers who are in the peer review panel, they want to know how can they make best use of the money that we have. So how can they fill in the gaps that exist in funding? And we know that there's very little money available for sex workers out there. So be strategic in the way you frame your challenges and limitations, and explain why that money that we have can actually make a big difference for your organization. So that needs to be very clear, okay? So I hope this video was helpful. There's more information in our website. Again, and this information is also compiled in a blog post. So have a look, and if you have any questions, my email is dennis@redumbrellafund.org. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Yeah, thank you very much. Bye.